Mike.
It's my great pleasure to be
Mike.
here. It is my great pleasure to be here with you this afternoon, this evening. My name is Rufus Chafin Stevenson, and I'm from a little town in Georgia, way down south, down the railroad tracks, called a little town called Newnan, Georgia, N-E-W-N-A-N. I was the seventh son of my family. There were 13 in my family, and I was the seventh son and the ninth child. I guess my family almost made me kind of special in the sense that when relatives came home every summer from Massachusetts and Ohio and whatnot, they would always ask, where's that seventh son? Because in Southern folklore, the seventh son is supposed to be somebody. He's supposed to make something out of himself. He's supposed to travel. He's supposed to see the world and whatnot. And I didn't realize that then, but as I reflect back on that, I remember every summer they would say, where is that boy? Where's that seventh child? Where's that seventh son and whatnot? And that made me kind of different and whatnot. So as a result, to make a long story short, I had to work my way up to college. And when I entered Morehouse College, I had saved enough money to pay for 3 years of college. So I didn't have to borrow no money or anything like that. I had saved money to pay for 3 years of college. And I was the first Morehouse College graduate to join the Peace Corps. And I served in Sierra Leone, West Africa. I taught mathematics at the oldest secondary school in West Africa called the Grammar School. After the Peace Corps, just give you a little bit about my life. After the Peace Corps, I studied in Germany for a year, because my college professor told me that, Herr Stevenson, you will never learn the Deutsch. I will never learn German, she told me, because I was a country boy and I could barely speak English. So she told me that you will never learn German. And so when I finished my 2 years teaching in Sierra Leone, I was determined to go to school in Germany in order to learn German, to go back to Morehouse and to prove to her I could speak German. So I was in Germany for a year studying the Deutsch language, and so I went back to Morehouse and had an hour and a half talk with her, and I never spoke German again. So I was drafted into Vietnam. I went to Vietnam. I was a military policeman in Vietnam, came back to Vietnam, and then I went to grad school at the School of Advanced International Studies at Johns Hopkins, and I joined the State Department. My first post was in Madagascar, and there I was exposed. That gave me East Africa. Peace Corps gave me West Africa. Madagascar gave me East Africa. And then my third post, I was stationed back into Mali. And I was 42 years ago. Mali was experiencing the first televised drought. And J.C. Hayward here in Washington and Carl Rowland from Channel 9 was sent to Mali to record and to broadcast that drought. So during that time, I realized that I was in an ancient civilization, an area that encompasses the Ghana Empire, the Mali Empire, the Songhai Empire. And I realized at that time, with my Malian philosopher teacher, that was very special. So I harnessed the moment, because Mali was filled with all kinds of African art and whatnot. So I harnessed the moment, and I seduced myself into the African spirit and decided I would play with my life. And I would harness Africa, I would collect African art, and I would bring back to America. And that was a time before the Smithsonian had an African museum. I brought all this back 40 years ago to Washington. I brought the kitty cloth back. I brought the Che Waters back. I brought the things that you see in the Smithsonian African Museum and whatnot. So 42 years ago, I met the spirit of the ancestors and decided I was going to be a cultural evangelist. So I came back to America, and since that time I've been building a foundation. Among the services that my 501c3 called Jock Kinty offer to the community is that I use colorful traditional African hand textiles to dress venues, to bring the African spirit into the venues. And so some of the sites that I've done, I did the Kennedy Center for 11 consecutive years for the Spirit of Kwanzaa Millennium stage, as well as the Grand Concert Hall stage. I met Kim in 2011. In case you have heard of Tony Browder, he's the only African male ever given permission from the Department of Antiquities in Egypt to excavate in the Valley of the Kings. It was only 3 months after the revolution in Egypt when I joined Tony Browder in Egypt, in Luxor, Egypt. And that's where I met Kim. She was a senior at the University of Maryland at the time, and we met then. But during that time, period in Egypt, that summer, 5 voices came to me as a cultural evangelist. And if you look at the backdrop back there, on that frame there, you would follow me. In the middle there, one night, I tell Kim and others that we had been there for about a week excavating in the Valley of the Kings, and that night I went to the roof of the hostel where we were living, and I looked across the road, and I saw for the first time the 65 feet tall red granite statues of Amenhotep III, who was the grandfather of King Tut. And I passed it every day going to the Valley of the Kings, but that night I looked and it was lit up. It was around 12 o'clock at night, and as I looked across the road at it, way in the background was the Valley of the Kings and the Valley of the Queens. And Kim and I, we were excavating in an area called South Asif, between the Valley of the Kings and the Valley of the Queens. And it came to me that the voice came to me and said, you know, I was Kemet before the white man came and changed my name. I was Kemet, K-E-M-E-T, before the white man came and changed my name. And I said, wow, because I was not an Egyptologist at that time at all. I just came with, I wanted to buy some African, every time I go to Africa, I try to buy African textiles, so I went to Egypt to buy some textiles. But that night, that voice came to me and I said, that's a voice that tells me that, because I didn't know that. And so the next day I went across the Nile and